Hey folks, if you're looking for an in-depth review, you're in the right place, because today I'm going to be diving into Red Candle Games' horror adventure, Devotion. Admittedly, this game has been on my radar for a long while, but for the longest time I wasn't able to play it. Specifically because it had been removed from Steam by the time I'd become aware of it. For those curious, the reason behind this removal was less due to spicy content, and more because a certain Pooh Bear adjacent politician, but that's neither here nor there. That said, I'd recently discovered that you can actually snag a DRM-free copy of the game off Red Candle's website, so I scooped it up. Which means I can now ask the burning question. Is this title worthy of praise, or did I wind up feeling like I should have devoted my attention elsewhere? I'm your host Arlyeon, let's find out together. Now, Devotion is a curious title, placing players in the role of Du Fengyu as he reminisces about his family and the time they spent together within the apartment that served as their home. A thin veneer of domestic bliss which begins to crack the longer the player looks, leaving them to scrutinize the sense of unease which gradually oozes to the surface. Narratively speaking, I am being very careful not to give much in the way of details, because the gradual unfurling of Devotion's story and the mystery at its heart is a central element of the experience. Early on, it managed to instill a sinister sense of uncertainty that was more or less a constant companion throughout the exploration of the Du's household day-to-day life, as you witness the gradual erosion of what initially seemed like an idyllic situation. Some of it comes in the form of long-past conversations, now echoed as you sift through the apartment time after time. And I mean this latter element literally, as Devotion as a whole is, essentially, the time-traveling apartment puzzle of detention, albeit extended to be an entire game. This particular quirk in Devotion is used to rather deft effect, as you find yourself encountering bits of foreshadowing that will sit at the back of your mind until it comes hurtling to the forefront once a particular segment plays out, or you stumble across a note and things just click together. In fact, the use of different points in time is used to such great effect that I'd argue that the apartment itself is, essentially, a character, as you witness the gradual evolution of its interior over the course of the years. It's jarring at times to see how different it becomes, and whilst some of those changes are done for dramatic effect, being more an allegory than a literal representation, other times you're left with something that looks very real and yet incredibly uncomfortable, and that's the heart of the matter, I think. Whilst the game is certainly willing to present you with a spectacle with set pieces and cutscenes which are surreal, the core of its horror is domestic. There's a very real element to what's happening which is absolutely unnerving to witness, to participate in. Because yes, like Detention, perhaps even more so, the puzzles here are central to the telling of Devotion's story, and unlike its predecessor, there is no golden ending to pursue. Still, it doesn't need to dangle an alternate ending. I've still found myself immersed in the experience and not just on a narrative front. Whilst Devotion is story-centric, it does provide a decent gamut of puzzle-oriented elements to chew on. While some of these veer into the tried and true find an item, bring an item to the certain location, there's a few amidst their lot which plays with the apartment's temporal mechanics or involve a bit more cleverness and sleuthing around. And some just involve you being harassed by spookies because of course this game is going to fuck with you. That said, there are a pair of segments which deviate from the game's established rules. One is in escape of sorts, which is sort of jarring because of how out of place it initially felt. The other, however, is a foray into 2D platforming adventure, and given Red Candle Games is currently working on a 2D action adventure called Nine Souls, this winds up being sort of weirdly fitting. Also, as a small mechanical quirk, once again you're relying primarily on autosaves, with the game providing you the opportunity to continue from where you last picked up, as well as a chapter select feature if you wanted to hunt around for any notes you missed, or just soak in a scene from earlier now that you have more context. Though, given I couldn't actually run, say for that one chase scene, I spent an ample amount of time nosing about in my initial playthrough. And with good reason. Devotion looks great. Despite the fact that the story takes place in a relatively contained environment, it manages to do a lot with that visually, both through the gradual evolution of that space, as well as the more surreal nightmare segments it introduces. It's a very cinematic game, and to its credit, it managed to execute this quite well, enough that it held my attention constantly. The sound design is also lovely, as I can't count the number of times I found my nerves fraying due to the absence of anything save whatever sounds were native to the apartment at a given time. Like, there was a moment I just sat there, basking in the sound of a heavy rain in an otherwise still apartment. That's not to say there isn't music, there's a good few tracks scattered here and there, but by and large, the accompaniment to your journey is going to be ambient noise. Still, I should mention, whilst I enjoyed the voice acting, it's not translated, so if you're adverse to subtitles, that element of the game may prove frustrating. But that brings us to our conclusion, so I may as well sum up everything nicely here, and first off, I just want to say I think it's a shame that I wasn't able to sink my teeth into this game sooner. I am a sucker for a good story, and Devotion managed to provide me with a legitimately eerie plot to discover and navigate. Though, like its predecessor Detention, there's a certain context, a realness to the whole of it which makes it all the more haunting. When you strip away the phantasmagorical imagery, you're left with a chilling story of a family's disintegration as desperation turns to misguided devotion. And yet, there's also a cultural element here that I wasn't actually aware of until Batsfine showed me a video by Super Eyepatch Wolf. Given that there's a lot of spoilers for the story, I'd suggest waiting until you've played Devotion to give that video a gander, but it provided a certain degree of clarity. And to be fair, it won't take you long to get through the game because it is fairly digestible as far as experiences go. Within the course of an evening, I cleared the game while taking my time doing so because, by and large, it's a fairly straightforward experience. Yes, there are a few clever puzzles, but just as often, if not more so, it provided scenes to engage with that were more meant to guide the narrative along, rather than challenge the player. Ultimately, everything in Devotion is in service to telling its story, and like I said, I think it does this well. Enough so that I fundamentally can call this game a hit. Even without the cultural context, I think the game does stand on its own merits, and now that you can actually snag it, I'd recommend doing so. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And remember, like and subscribe in support of your glorious leader. Or if you just enjoy indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content. For the Discord savvy folks, click the video description to find a link to my community, the Crit Hit Cauldron, and to my Patreon so you can support me and the other members of Crit Hit. Lastly, if you want to see me get dunked on in indie games live, check out the Twitch at twitch.tv/Arlyeon. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.